3,470 kilometers, 2,156 miles, or 2,155,297.5 Yuki Tsunodas. That is the distance of the 500 laps that I'm about to drive around Spa-Francorchamps, the home of the Belgium Grand Prix. On the last year's F1 game, I only got into the top 10% in the world, so in this video, my goal is to get into the top 5%. Is this actually possible on a controller? I've got no idea, but there's only one way to find out. This shouldn't come as a surprise anymore, but as you can probably imagine, my first lap was a disaster, but that's to be expected at this point. To be fair, for a first lap, this actually started off alright, until we got to turn 10 where I just went way too deep, and now it was time for No Name Corner, and then this happened. However, I wasn't too concerned about this because I had 499 laps left to drive after this, and trust me, you want to see how much progress that I end up making. Anyway, we're going to go straight to the end of the lap here, but I'm going to take you through the whole of it just so you get an idea of how I was driving at this point compared to my best lap at the end of the video. So as you just saw, my first lap was in the top 98% in the world, but don't worry, that's only because I invalidated. And obviously, I'm not going to waste your time, but in the rest of this stint, I made 4 more improvements, but weirdly, I didn't make any improvements after lap 25. However, by the time we got to lap 50, I was in the top 63% in the world, and I finally felt like I was getting used to the new handling that has just been introduced to the F1 game. If you play on a controller like myself, you'll definitely be understanding the pain that I went through. Anyway, that's enough of my waffle. Here's the 50th lap of 500 in this challenge, and my first stint was officially complete. I now knew that I really had to get my head down if I wanted to set a lap time in the top 5% in the world. And that's exactly what I was doing, because 7 laps into this second stint, I was leaving Pouhon 2.5 tenths up. First up was turn 13, where initially I had a really good run. I carried great minimum speed, but in the end it was a little bit too high because I missed the apex for turn 14 by an absolute mile. But because at this point in the challenge I was driving at such a low level, somehow I still managed to find time, and I did the same thing at turn 15, and leaving turn 15 I was half a second up to the delta. And as you're about to see, unlike my previous personal best, this time I had a really good exit leaving turn 16, and this was huge because I was now almost a second up. So we're going to speed up to the bus stop chicane here because luckily for me nothing wrong happened through Blanchimont, and that was a crucial part of the lap if I wanted to make any progress. At first I actually thought that I messed up the chicane. Thankfully though, I got really good traction leaving the final corner, and in the end I made just over 9 tenths worth of progress. And in terms of the leaderboard, I gained 9%, which was huge at this point in the challenge. And 11 laps later, we're coming into the bus stop chicane half a tenth up, but I was looking to make up for the poor first part of it that I had on my previous personal best. And to be honest, that's pretty much exactly what I did. As always, I try and follow the world record holder's line, and that really helped, but sadly I didn't have quite as good of an exit out of the final corner. But so early on in this challenge, it really didn't matter, and I had still made 5.5 tenths worth of progress. And as you can see by my delta, on my very next improvement, leaving the final corner, I actually had a good exit, and this brought me into the top 53% in the world. So right now you may be wondering why I'm showing you this lap, but trust me, you're about to see why. So currently I'm around 4 tenths down coming into Lecon, but on my last lap going through these section of corners I lost around a second, and I was determined to make up for this. And I did just that, because going through turns 7, 8 and 9 I didn't make a single mistake, and I was 4 tenths down coming into this section of corners, but I was now over 5 tenths up. Annoyingly though, throughout the rest of this lap I lost around a quarter of a second worth of progress, and sadly it was only going to go downhill from here. Into the first part of the chicane I just broke way too late, and after this it was damage limitation, and thankfully I did gain a little bit of time in the end. But this was only 1.5 tenths worth of improvement when, let's be honest, it probably could have been over half a second. Sadly I didn't make any more improvements on this stint, but here is lap 100 of my 500 lap challenge, and I was now into the top 51% in the world with a lot of work to do. So you'll probably remember that on my last improvement I was finishing up the first sector 4 tenths down, and that was mainly because I had a horrible run through the first corner, and I was desperate to make sure that my first improvement on this third stint would be making up for that previous mistake. And as you can see, lap 113 of this challenge started really well because I was coming into Eau Rouge 3.5 tenths up, and I gained loads of time going through Eau Rouge because for the first time in this challenge I took it flat, and this wouldn't be the first discovery that I make in this lap. So we're actually going to speed up all the way to turn 13 here because going through the rest of these corners my delta just basically went up and down, but by the time we got to turn 13 it was pretty much the same as it was. At this point turn 13 was becoming a recurring error because every single time I either carried way too high minimum speed or way too low, and this time it was too high. Going through turn 14 to try and make up for this I just had a massive wobble, and this cost me around 4 tenths of a second. Once again we're going to speed up this straight because by the time I got to the bus stop chicane my delta had not changed, and it was now time for me to make up for running too deep into the bus stop chicane on my previous personal best. And I absolutely nailed the braking point coming into the bus stop chicane, and the rest of it went well too, and in the end I made 5 tenths worth of progress. And for the first time in this challenge I was into the top 40% in the world. 5 laps later we're coming into turn 13 2.5 tenths up, but I was more concerned about nailing turn 14. But if I'm I'm honest with you, I didn't even take turn 14 that well in the end, but I still managed to gain loads of time. But I was about to make yet another massive mistake. Leaving Stavolo, I was just desperate to find even more time, and this ended up making me just carry way too high minimum speed, and I ended up having an awful exit out of here, which would carry all the way up to the bus stop chicane. And by the time we get to the chicane, sadly, I would only be 1.4 tenths. However, I would end up having the best chicane that I'd had in the entire challenge so far, and in the end, I gained 2 tenths, which was not too bad considering it could have been a lot worse. However, for my next improvement, I knew that I would be desperate to make up for my mistake. We're now on to lap 127 in this challenge, and I won't waste your time. Going through turn 16, I absolutely nailed it, and leaving turn 17, I was now 4.5 tenths up, which I maintained till the bus stop chicane, but so annoyingly, I just wasn't committed enough going through these 2 corners, and this cost me loads of time. And by the time we reach the finish line, I'll be over 2 tenths up, which is good, but honestly, I was just so annoyed with myself. The way that I saw it was, if I've got over 350 laps left to drive, why am I not being more committed into the final 2 corners of a lap where I can possibly make half a second worth of progress, which would be huge. Anyway, that's enough of my waffle. Here's the 150th lap of this challenge, and to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed with this stint, although my final lap was pretty good. And I knew that it was going to be difficult to beat, but I did know that there was time in the final 2 corners. Sadly though, in the next stint, I wouldn't even get the chance to improve through the bus stop chicane. From laps 150 to 200, I had an absolute nightmare. Every time I came into Le Combe, I felt like I was going back to lap 1 because I just never took it well. And it's not like I was pushing more through here because there was time to find, it was just that nothing ever seemed to work, and yes, even sometimes I restart laps. Anyways, here's the 200th lap of this challenge, and I was desperate to have a good 5th stint to make up for this. And honestly, this 5th stint could not have started any better. I made 3 very quick improvements inside the first 20 laps, and this put me into the top 28% in the world. Obviously, I was absolutely delighted with this. I felt like I was fully out of the rut that I'd been in for the previous 50 laps, however, I was still yet to nail Le Combe, and on my next improvement, I was desperate to hook up that section of corners. So it actually took me ages to get to the next opportunity to make an improvement in this stint, but on lap 243, I was coming into Le Combe only half a tenth down to my delta. Initially going through turn 7 and 8, I didn't gain any time, but this was because I was trying to set myself up for a brilliant exit leaving turn 9, and this worked out perfectly because leaving that corner, I was 1.5 tenths up. This was probably the first time in around 100 laps where I felt like I nailed that section of corners, and now it was time to push on to see if I can make further progress. Through turn 10, I brought my delta to 2 tenths up, and then going through No Name corner, I had an excellent run, and I was now 3 tenths up, which I would maintain to the bus stop chicane, and this was crucial if I wanted to make any progress. And for the level that I was driving at this point in the challenge, I absolutely nailed these 2 corners. It just went perfectly, and in the end, I gained just under 4 tenths of a second. This moved me into the top 22% in the world, and for the first time in this challenge, I believe that I could genuinely complete my overall goal of getting into the top 5% in the world. Unsurprisingly, because after my improvement there was only 6 laps left in the stint, I didn't make any more progress on this 50 laps. However, for the next stint, I was just so motivated to get closer to the overall goal. So it actually took me a while to get to my next improvement, but halfway through the next stint, I was coming into turn 10 half a tenth up. So to be honest, going through turn 10, I had a pretty poor run, and I only just about maintained a positive delta. However, I had a new idea for No Name corner. On my previous improvement, I went through turn 11 in 5th gear. However, this time I chose 4th gear, and this gained me around 1.5 tenths. Now it's time for Pouhon, and I'm not going to lie to you lot, I've got no idea how I gained any time through here, but this brought me to 3 tenths up, and I maintained this till the bus stop chicane again. To be honest, going into the chicane, I knew that it would be really difficult to gain any time, and I was basically spot on about this. By the time we get to the finish line, I'll only be a quarter of a second up, but this was still a massive improvement and gained me 5% in terms of the leaderboard. However, I was not done just yet on this stint, because on lap 283 of this challenge, I was going through turn 1, and I gained a little bit of time with a pretty poor run, to be honest, which is a good thing, because that means that there is time to find on future improvements. Anyway, by the time we get to the end of the first sector, I was only 3.5 tenths away from the world record holder, which is my best so far. Now it's time for Le Combe, and I absolutely nailed it. This time going through turn 7 and 8, I gained time. Sadly, I lost a little bit of time going through turn 9, but in total, I gained a full tenth from those section of 3 corners. Now it's time for turn 10, where this time I took a wider line, which I didn't really expect to gain me any time, but in the end, I gained around 200ths of a second, but I did not expect what was going to happen next. Going through No Name corner, I gained even more time, and that was completely unexpected, but I will definitely take it, and by the time we get to turn 13, I'll be just under 3 tenths up. Going through turn 13, and specifically turn 14, thankfully I didn't lose any time, and now it was time for another corner where I always made mistakes, turn 15. However, on this lap, everything just seemed to go absolutely perfectly, because I gained another tenth and a half, and this brought me to almost half a second up. But I didn't know that I was about to do something just so stupid. For some reason, on the run up to Blanchimont, I must have just switched off for a second, and I ran along the grass, and this cost me well over a tenth and a half. And then I made yet another rookie mistake. Going into the bus stop chicane, I just broke way too late, and then on it was damage limitation. Thankfully, by the time I got to the finish line, I had made another 2/10 gain, but I knew that there was time to find in turn 1, going on the run up to Blanchimont and the final bit of the bus stop chicane. Sadly, my improvement that would make up for these mistakes was not in this stint, but I still had 200 laps to go and a hell of a lot of momentum behind me. Sadly, I didn't quite carry that momentum into my next stint, but what I did do on lap 334 of this 500 lap challenge was make up for my previous error going through the bus stop chicane. Once again, to be honest, I I went a little bit too deep into the first part of the chicane, but it was a lot better than last time, and this meant that I would make an improvement. Somehow, even though this was only 2 to 300ths of a second worth of progress, I moved up a massive 2% in the world. And 8 laps later, coming into Pouhon, I was equal to my delta, and I knew once again I had my momentum back. So on my previous improvement, I must have made a mistake, because going through Pouhon, I somehow gained a couple of hundredths of a second, but now we're coming up to the crucial turn 13, 14, 15 and 16. And in the past, I had struggled with this section of corners. However, on this lap, that would not be the case, because I nailed pretty much every single one of these corners, and I even thought that I was going to spin out on the exit of turn 16 at the curb, but I did not do that, and I was now over 2/10 up. Fortunately, nothing happened between the exit of turn 16 and the bus stop chicane, so we're going to speed up to the crucial final 2 corners on this lap, where there was even more time to find. Luckily for me, this time going through the bus stop chicane, I didn't really make any mistake that would hurt my progress. I had a slight wobble going through the middle of these 2 corners, but it kind of set me up for a good exit out of the final corner. And by the time I got to the finish line, this lap would be worth 3% in terms of the leaderboard, and I was getting so much closer to my goal with 158 laps left to drive. Sadly, in the 8 remaining laps in this stint, I didn't quite make an improvement, but I wasn't too worried, because I still had 150 laps left to drive, and I was certain that there was time to find in a lot of corners. Once again, it took me a while to get to my first improvement in this stint. However, on lap 378 of this challenge, I was coming into Lecon with my fastest first sector of this entire challenge so far, and I just hooked up this section of 3 corners absolutely perfectly, and leaving turn 9, I was a quarter of a second up, which I knew at this point in the challenge would be huge in terms of the leaderboard. So we're actually going to speed up to Pouhon here, because going through turn 10 and no name corner, I didn't gain any time or lose any time, which is absolutely fine by me. However, it was all about to go downhill through Pouhon, because going through this corner, I didn't really take it flat out. I missed the apex and I carried way less minimum speed, which cost me a full 10. Next up is turn 13 and 14. Thankfully, I didn't make any mistakes, because that would have really annoyed me, and I could set myself up for turn 15, which I knew that there was time to find it. And that is exactly what I did, because going through turn 15, I took the perfect line and got a brilliant exit, but I did quite the opposite going through turn 16, and I ran along the curb way too much. This ended up costing me around 3/100ths of a second, but I still had 120 laps left to drive after this, and I didn't lose any more time on the run up to the bus stop chicane. And honestly, I had such a similar run to my previous improvement going through the bus stop chicane. I had the wobble in the middle part of it, and then I got a pretty good exit. We're now coming up to the finish line, and I thought that this was going to be the lap to complete the challenge, but sadly I was 1% off the top 5% in the world, and this is where I realised that this challenge was going to be extremely difficult to complete. And here's lap 400 of this 500 lap challenge. In the next 100 laps, I had to set a lap time that was 1% faster in terms of the leaderboard. However, I was driving at my maximum ability at this point in the challenge, and the lap that would put me into the top 5% in the world would have to be one of my best laps that I've ever driven on this channel. I had done it. On lap 415 of this 500 lap challenge around Spa-Francorchamps, I got into the top 5% in the world, and to be honest, this lap was pretty much perfect. Honestly, I'm just so happy, because compared to last game, I can already see that I'm improving a load, and I really want to push on, because I genuinely think on a 500 lap challenge by the end of the year, I can get into the top 1% in the world. Anyway, here's laps 450 and 500 of this challenge, and please can I ask you to subscribe, because I drove an average of 100 laps per day for this video. This is because at the time of recording, the time trial leaderboard was reset on Monday, and this is is also my longest video ever, and I'd really appreciate it because according to Social Blade, I'm currently on track to hit 25,000 subscribers by the end of the year.